let's just dive right into this explainer, because today we are unpacking one of the most dramatic, high-stakes corporate transformations in literal history. We're going to break down the exact strategic blueprint that Netflix used to, well, completely rewrite the rules of the entertainment landscape and totally redefine how all of us consume media. I mean, think about it for a second. How did a company that literally mailed plastic discs to people's houses become this unstoppable global entertainment giant? How did they manage to convince millions of us to completely ditch our comfortable decades-old TV habits? Well, the answer is about a lot more than just streaming technology. To really get why they dominate today, we have to go back, way back, to the very beginning. Section 1. The DVD rental revolution. Back to 1997. So, when founders Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph started Netflix back in 1997, they were not trying to build some massive tech empire. They were actually just trying to solve a very specific physical problem. They got their first DVD rental site up and running in '98, and then by 1999, boom, they rolled out a subscription model. See, they figured out something super crucial really early on. Unlike those bulky VHS tapes everyone had back then, DVDs were incredibly light. Like, they cost practically nothing to ship. So they capitalized on that exact physical format to do something totally wild at the time. They bypassed traditional retail stores completely and essentially used the US Postal Service as their very own distribution network. Now, this whole early strategy was built around killing one major roadblock, and that's customer friction. If you were renting movies in the 90s, you know this pain. The friction was the absolute misery of getting in your car, driving all the way to a physical store, finding out that the new release you wanted was out of stock, and then the absolute worst part, getting slapped with a massive late fee days later because you forgot to bring it back. It was just an inherently flawed, highly frustrating consumer experience. So Netflix's goal was ruthlessly simple: completely eradicate that friction. They didn't just want to be another video store, they wanted to be the absolute easiest way to watch a movie, period. Moving right along to Section 2, the subscription revolution, changing the rules of renting. Okay, so Netflix didn't just change how you got the movie, they entirely revolutionized the actual business model behind it. By moving away from that old pay-per rental system and just charging a flat monthly fee, they unlocked some truly incredible business economics. I'm talking recurring revenue. That meant highly predictable income. They knew exactly what cash was coming through the door every single month, which meant they could invest super aggressively in growth. And for the user, ultimate convenience, which naturally led to massive customer retention. This wasn't just a quick one-off transaction anymore. They were building a deeply integrated, totally habit-forming relationship with us, the customers. You know, their entire philosophy basically boiled down to one simple, absolutely unyielding mandate: make the customer experience easier. Every single operational and strategic decision they made went straight through that lens. Let people keep DVDs as long as they want without penalties? Yep, done. Build this massively complex web of regional distribution centers, literally just so the mail arrives one day faster? Absolutely. Whatever it took to make the customer's life relentlessly easy, they just went ahead and did it. Which brings us to Section 3, Netflix versus Blockbuster, David meets Goliath. It is so tempting today to look back and just say, oh, Netflix was smart and Blockbuster was clueless. But guys, business history is rarely that clean. Think about the crazy strategic mismatch here. Blockbuster was an absolute behemoth, right? But they were completely tied down by expensive commercial real estate, a massive retail footprint, and real physical inventory constraints. And worse, they had this deeply perverse incentive. They heavily relied on late fees to make their money. Their business model literally profited when you, the customer, failed. Meanwhile, Netflix is over here offering a massive digital selection with absolutely zero shelf space limits, unparalleled convenience, and a digital-first mindset from literally day one. This wasn't just a battle of brands, it was a war of fundamental business models. So, spoiler alert, Netflix eventually wins that battle. Blockbuster fades into history. But that massive physical victory raised an immediate and totally existential question for Netflix. How on earth were they going to survive the inevitable death of the DVD? Winning the mail war was huge for sure, but they entirely understood that those lightweight plastic discs were just a transitional technology. They knew it wasn't going to last forever. Let's look at Section 4, the pivot to streaming, a dangerous leap. Okay, so what they did next is honestly one of the hardest things for any successful corporation to actually pull off. they had to intentionally abandon a highly profitable, proven physical delivery model. As broadband internet exploded in homes around the world and physical media began its slow, painful decline, Netflix found themselves staring down a classic innovator's dilemma. But instead of fiercely trying to protect their incredibly lucrative DVD profits, they made this incredibly bold choice to basically cannibalize their own core business. They bet the entire future of the company on streaming video over the internet. They leaned hard into where the technology was heading instead of just comfortably defending where they already were. And that leads us to Section 5, the power of data, the secret weapon. Here is the massive detail that most people totally miss about this era. Digital streaming, it wasn't just a faster or cheaper delivery method, it was a Trojan horse. Think about it. With DVDs, Netflix only knew what movie you ordered and what day you shipped it back. It was super limited, purely transactional data. But with streaming, suddenly they're tracking incredibly granular behavioral data, like when exactly did you hit play? When did you pause? Which specific scenes did you skip over? What totally obscure genres were you binge watching on a random Sunday afternoon? Gaining this incredibly deep, unprecedented understanding of their customers totally shifted the power dynamic in their favor. And all that wealth of data unlocked their true superpower, personalization. Remember that whole concept of customer friction we talked about earlier? Well, personalization completely eliminated the friction of trying to figure out what to watch next. The algorithm literally replaced that local video store clerk who used to give you recommendations. By crunching massive data sets and serving up exactly what you wanted, sometimes before you even knew you wanted it, Netflix drastically improved the user experience. It kept viewers glued to their ecosystem and built this giant protective moat of retention that their competitors simply could not touch. So they mastered the physical logistics of the DVD, right? And then they conquered that incredibly dangerous technological jump to digital streaming. Now, mastering digital distribution is a historic business feat all on its own. But here's the crazy part. Their biggest, most industry-shattering transformation was still ahead of them. Because eventually they realized that controlling the pipes wasn't going to be enough if someone else still owned the water. So, in part 2 of this explainer, the story is going to get even more fascinating. We're going to dive into their super aggressive pivot to becoming an actual Hollywood content creator. We'll look at the deliberate invention of the whole binge-watching phenomenon, their massive global expansion, and of course, the fierce new competitive challenges they are facing in today's insanely crowded market. But before we wrap up today, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. Was Netflix successful because it just magically possessed some crystal ball to predict the future? Or was it simply because they were willing to change before the future fully arrived? Seriously, think about that subtle but absolutely massive difference in corporate strategy. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I am so excited to dive into part 2 with you next time.
Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Look, we all know the legend by now, right? That scrappy little startup shipping DVDs in red envelopes that somehow managed to completely disrupt Blockbuster. But what we're going to explore today is exactly how that same company transformed into a massive global entertainment empire. This isn't just another tech story. It's a total masterclass in strategy, risk-taking, and, ultimately, corporate survival. So, as this timeline brilliantly illustrates, Netflix had already done the impossible. They literally crushed the traditional video rental business by leveraging early customer data and then executed a remarkably smooth jump right into the streaming revolution. They totally changed how we access our movies and TV shows. But here's the catch. To truly secure their future just being a delivery system, it simply wasn't going to be enough. They realized they needed to become a company capable of creating the entertainment itself.
Which brings us to part 1, the original content bet. Now, what's really interesting about this comparison is how it frames their absolute existential threat. Picture this. You're sitting on a ticking time bomb, realizing that if you build your entire house on rented land, the landlord can kick you out literally whenever they want, or just raise the rent to impossible levels. Relying entirely on other people's licensed content was a massive vulnerability for them. But by producing their own original shows, Netflix could build an exclusive library that they owned permanently. It was all about securing those valuable content rights forever.
All right, let's move along to part 2 and look at House of Cards and their overall content strategy.
So there's this popular myth floating around that some super smart algorithm just spit out the script for their first mega hit, House of Cards. Well, that's just simply not true. Sure, the data showed them that a guaranteed audience existed for a political thriller with specific talent like David Fincher, but it took top-tier human creativity, And oh yeah, a massive $100 million upfront gamble to actually execute it and capture people's attention. This was a total game changer that shifted the balance of power between Silicon Valley and traditional Hollywood.
And that leads us right into part 3, the binge-watching revolution. Remember when we actually had to patiently wait a whole week for a new episode to drop? That sounds crazy now, right? Netflix realized that by releasing massive batches of episodes all at once, they were handing the power completely back to the viewer. By ruthlessly removing any friction between you and the next piece of entertainment, hello, 5-second autoplay countdown, they practically invented modern binge-watching. You don't even have to press a button anymore. The next episode just starts.
Okay, let's dive into part 4, scaling a global empire. So, conquering the US market was one thing, but taking over the globe? That required a totally different playbook. They knew they couldn't just export American shows with cheap subtitles and call it a day. Instead, they heavily funded local productions, which created massive global phenomenons out of shows made in Spain, like Money Heist, or South Korea with Squid Game. They deeply understood that winning globally means investing in authentic native storytelling, really meticulous dubbing, and top-notch localization.
Which brings us to the core of it all in part 5, the Netflix business flywheel.
Now, this right here is the absolute engine behind their crazy growth. It's a classic flywheel. More subscribers generate more revenue. That revenue funds even better content. That premium content creates irresistible value, which, you guessed it, draws in even more subscribers. Once this wheel gets spinning, it creates an insanely powerful feedback loop and a competitive moat that is practically impossible for others to cross.
But, and this is a massive but, feeding this incredible growth engine is terrifyingly cash-intensive. You can't just kick back and coast on last year's hits. You have to constantly pour billions, and we're talking sometimes upwards of $17 billion a year, right back into the top of the funnel just to keep things fresh so your subscribers don't hit that dreaded cancel button.
And that segues perfectly into part 6, the challenges behind the success.
Because, let's be real, no company operates in a vacuum. Success on this massive scale inevitably attracts fierce competition. Giants like Disney+, Amazon Prime Video, Max, and even free platforms like YouTube are all fighting a brutal, all-out war for your exact same screen time. And as subscriber growth naturally hits a ceiling, paying for all that expensive content gets way harder. This is exactly why we've seen Netflix make some really bold and frankly controversial pivots lately, like the dreaded password sharing crackdowns and introducing ad-supported tiers, all just to squeeze out more revenue and maintain their growth.
So how did they survive all this? Part 7, the real secret, adaptability.
Here's the thing. Despite all these ongoing struggles, their true superpower isn't streaming tech at all. It's their ruthless willingness to basically cannibalize their own business. They possess this incredible long-term mindset that allows them to aggressively experiment. They never fell in love with their delivery method. They fell in love with entertaining their customers. Whether it's a physical DVD, a streaming app, or a massive global blockbuster, they continually use technology to evolve.
Okay, let's synthesize this in part 8, business lessons for entrepreneurs.
Understanding the history is fun, but applying the strategy is where the real value is for us. First off, never, ever get trapped by your initial success. If Netflix had just clung to those DVDs to protect their early profit margins, they'd literally be a footnote in history today. You have to disrupt your own model before someone else does it for you. And second, ruthlessly eliminate friction for your customers. Making the experience as easy as clicking autoplay is an absolutely massive competitive advantage.
Furthermore, definitely let data point you in the right direction, but you absolutely have to let human creativity drive the car. You have to give people a compelling reason to stick around month after month. Also, look globally when the opportunity pops up, and most importantly, build a culture that embraces constant experimentation. Because honestly, a business that stops experimenting is a business that starts dying.
Finally, part 9, conclusion, rewriting the story.
When you really step back and look at it, the most profound lesson here isn't about the mechanics of DVDs or streaming at all. Survival requires the sheer courage to look at a highly profitable, perfectly functioning system and say, you know what? We need to tear this down and build the next iteration before somebody else does. Netflix survived because it completely reinvented itself, over and over again.
The huge takeaway here is that yesterday's winning strategy can absolutely become tomorrow's biggest weakness. You have to rewrite your own story before the market rewrites it for you. Hey, make sure to subscribe to Wealthy Coded HQ for more incredible business strategies just like this. But before we go, I want to leave you with this question for your own career or business. What is the DVD rental part of your life right now that you need to be brave enough to disrupt? Keep adapting, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.